Welcome back to this episode of the Strong Kind podcast. This episode is with Taylor Goldberg. Taylor is a doctor of chiropractic. She can be found on Instagram at the Hypermobile Chiro. Taylor and me talked about hypermobility, people with joint laxity, and how there's a ton of things people can do with these connective tissue disorders. We also talked about misinformation in the chiropractic field, in the rehab field, and even in the healthcare space regarding hypermobility. It was a great talk. I always enjoy talking to Taylor. She's got a very positive outlook, and she cares about helping people get strong and living life as best possible. It was a great episode. Appreciate you being here. Check it out on YouTube or Spotify. Peace. All right, Taylor. We just talked. We get
You
talking.
ruined it already.
I know, we get talking and then I'm like, that was so good. Why didn't we start with that? But a big reason that I wanted you to come on is you are in the Ehlers-Danlos, which I always feel like I'm saying that incorrectly, but I think I got it decent. But the EDS, the hypermobility, like you're a clinician that you help people with that, but you also have dealt with it for a long time. But I guess where I wanted to start this conversation was with, what are the things that you, when you were like young, like struggled with, that if you knew you were dealing with specifics, like you knew, like how are you now helping the person you are when you were younger? Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes total sense. And so just a little bit about my story. I am really lucky and unique in that I actually did have that support from my mom, because she also dealt with this when I was young. And so not only was I able to see that, or my mom see that when I was young and get me the help, now I'm starting to get other parents to see that, which is really cool. And so some of the biggest one for me was I couldn't hold a pencil. I really struggled to hold a pencil. And so I didn't start writing until second grade. And so some people would just be like, oh, that's fine, that's normal. But my mom dug deeper and realized it was because I was in pain when I was holding my pencil. When a kid is in pain doing something as simple as holding a pencil or holding up a book and reading a book, and especially when they're like the type of kid that doesn't really complain about anything, which I was, that's a red flag. And so that would be the biggest thing, is like, if your kids are struggling or complaining about pain in general, look out for that. The other one that's really common, I didn't experience this personally, but growing pains that don't go away. Growing pains go away. And so that's another big one. But then some other, like, just having a harder time with like reading comprehension, having a harder time socializing. I had a really hard time making friends as a kid. Being that like the weird kid, struggling in those ways, I think were some other red flags now looking back that I would have liked help with.
It's so interesting because like now I know you professionally and to some degree personally. Like it's like, oh man, how are you like awkward? Right. But then I look back at like, I was awkward too. What were like, how did those things, or this is one of the big things. I mean, you've talked about this, but I don't think since we haven't talked about it on this podcast, but it's like the cyclical loops of a lot of stuff. Like I go through bits of high anxiety and high, like, and I would say I probably have shades of like depression. I've gone through depressive episodes, and like honestly my pain elevates, and it's like, hey, is my pain increasing my depression, or is my depression increasing my pain, right? And that's the hard part about being a human. It's like, it's probably not one way or the other. It's probably back and forth, right? But like anxiety is something that, man, I hate to use that even word because it's so much more than that. But we can talk about that. But like people will be like, well, you're just kind of being anxious about your symptoms. And I always want to make this case that like, I'm not saying that you know what you're doing, but you worrying about your body, or it can become this vicious cycle where we always have to kind of orient around like, what can we do about this, right? But like, how do you navigate that as somebody who has dealt with this, and it affected you a lot, but then when you're helping people with hypermobility, I keep saying hypo because I'm hypomobile. hypermobility, their body in general, because that's a big thing. Like that's kind of the overarching thing, is like I don't want people to be like a prisoner to their body is really like what it comes down to.
Yeah. And a lot of people with hypermobility, unfortunately, do feel that way. And there's a lot of really good reasons for that. And if we're being completely honest, big part of it is the narratives that clinicians are telling them and that they start telling themselves. And so going back to your original question, flares, that's what I label an increase in symptom as, is a flare. Flares are a part of life. When you have a chronic illness, which hypermobility, so let's get some definitions out there first. Hypermobility means is a characteristic that some people have. That means your joints go past their end of range of motion. If you were ever told you're double jointed, that is a form of hypermobility. In the world of hypermobility, if you have 5 or more joints that are hypermobile, that gets labeled as generalized joint hypermobility. That can be asymptomatic, meaning you don't have any pain, you don't have any fatigue, you've got no issues. Great. Use that hypermobility to your advantage. I'm probably not going to talk to you. You probably don't need my help. Then there's symptomatic generalized joint hypermobility, which can be split into 2 categories, genetic or acquired. Acquired means you got it from something. Maybe you were a gymnast. Maybe you got in a car accident. Something traumatic led to this generalized symptomatic hypermobility, whereas genetic means it is a genetic connective tissue disorder, and there's multiple types. For the conversation we're having, we're talking about Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome specifically. Now, with all of that being said, there are certain diagnoses that change our treatment plan. This is one of them. When a diagnosis changes our treatment plan, it is important and validating to label it and to get help with it. But the point of that diagnosis is not to say you have this, there's nothing you can do about it. Go about your day. You're now a prisoner in your own body.
Yeah.
No, instead, you have this and there's so much we can do to help. We just might have to do things a little bit differently, and we might have to change some things up a little bit. And one of those is how we look at flares. And so the biggest thing with flares that I tell all of my clients is focus on what you can do for yourself for relief first, how you can make that accessible to yourself. And then when we get relief, we can worry about the why and create a more proactive long-term plan. So we take this as proactive versus reactive.
Yeah, I mean, me and you are in the same general how we should deal with stuff as a human is generally proactive, right? Yeah. And it's also looking at diagnoses, musculoskeletal diagnoses. Even I will say, like, I got diagnosed with it wasn't like a formal diagnosis. It was the therapist I was working with at the time. It's like, you have somatic, it seems like you have somatic like somatic pain or somatic, like some form of somatic disorder. And like all somatic means is your body.
Like, yeah, literally.
And so I was having honestly symptoms of like fatigue and exhaustion, and like honestly just being high anxiety. This was in 2020. There was a lot of reasons to be like our current information oriented world. My brain takes all that in and ruminates on it, right? But like when it comes to pain, when it comes to like your physical body, and when it comes to your mental health, like proactivity is powerful. Like being given a diagnosis without a plan on how to move on it is frankly bullshit. Like, and also frankly, like there's so much you can do for just about anything.
Yes.
That is it's probably within most people's capacity to start. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have barriers, right? Doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard, because pretty much everything is hard.
Yeah,
but
really hard.
Change is hard. Like literally, I was on a podcast this morning, and basically like your brain, your subconscious is always asking like these questions. And this hit me this week. It's like, okay, am I safe? Is there something new in my environment? Is there potential mate in my environment? Is there potential resources like water, food, and there's actually like probably like literally 500 more questions that your subconscious brain is just always processing. Yep. Right. And knowing that makes it a little more clear, like why this shit, if you don't get help, like if you don't get clarity on like taking action, can be so imprisoning, I guess is the way I would put it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And like going back on that, I was actually talking with a client right before this, like knowing what your red flags are and knowing when something is emergent or urgent and you do need help right away, versus when you can play around with this a little bit, you can see how your body reacts, I think can help a lot with this dooming feeling that you're always doing something wrong, you're always injuring yourself, you're a prisoner to your body. That's not true. That's just a story you're telling yourself. And we need to create a plan together to say, okay, if I'm not experiencing one of these red flag symptoms, I can focus on relief first. And this is not emergent. I'm okay. I am safe.
Yeah. Do you think, what percentage of like, this is like a random guess of on your part, but like what percentage of the medical community is even like, let's see if even say the rehab community is even aware of like, hey, I can help people with hypermobility, like, or I should learn more about hypermobility. Is it like
10% maybe?
That's probably what I was gonna go with too. Like,
Yeah.
it's something that we had like one small thing in school that literally, I mean, no offense, but like every girl started to assess if they were hypermobile. Like that's pretty much just what happened. Like, because all the guys like were like, there was maybe a few guys who had, you know, a hypermobile joint, like, or something like that, but it was like literally 15 minutes, and then it's like, all right. So with that in mind, like I know a big piece of what you're trying to do is just educate both patients and clinicians, but what are the things that people can do? Like, what are the things that a clinician can help with? Referring to you is obviously a big one. But you know, the reality of it is there's people that are going to be seen in a clinic, and like you can make positive change. So like, what can people do?
Yeah. And like my biggest wish in this world is, or like thing that I need people to know is, I guarantee, and I don't make a lot of guarantees, I guarantee every single clinician will have at least one hypermobile person that they treat in their career, probably more. Yeah. With that being said, that means we need to at least know the bare minimum of what to do. And so I have a course that talks all about this. So if you want more information, let me know. But there's 3 types of patients that you're going to get walking into your clinic. Someone who knows they're hypermobile and they know all the things. Somebody who saw something about hypermobility and they're curious about it. Like, is this something I have? Is this part of my pain story? And then the person that doesn't know what hypermobility is at all, and you notice they're hypermobile, and that might be a part of their pain story. We're going to treat those 3 patients very differently. And we cannot change beliefs and we cannot change behaviors on the first visit. But what we can do is start building that rapport, building that trust, and validating based off of the person in front of you. So for the first type of patient, the one who knows they're hypermobile and they're coming to you for this, they probably know a lot. Most people who already have a diagnosis have gone down the rabbit hole of research. And the biggest, best advice for clinicians is validate them and let them know what they are experiencing is real, and send them to real sources of information instead of Reddit, TikTok, Google, because it is dangerous out there. It is scary out there. I have a whole resource page. Just give them that. That's a really good starting point. The EDS Society also has a lot of resources. That's a great starting point. And just tell them, do not go on Reddit. Do not go on the Facebook support groups. That's a great place to start. Now, as far as like rehab in general goes, I think the biggest thing we can do for hypermobile patients is strength train and teach them how to properly gain strength for not going 0 to 100. The number one thing we see in hypermobility is you were an athlete before, you were able to do all the things before, and then something triggered your symptoms, and now you can't do those things, and you haven't done them for a while. You go back to the gym and you start training like you did when you were an athlete, and unfortunately, we don't have that level of capacity anymore. So load management, auto regulations, the same things you do with everybody else, just maybe a little bit slower and a little bit more empathetic.
Well, I just read something. I can't remember. It wasn't Adam Meekins. It was somebody else. It was the other British guy that I follow. That's a physio, and he's like, so he's like, individualization is you don't need to like reinvent the wheel to individualize stuff. I think that's a big misconception. It's like, but it does need to be personalized. Yes. And I'm like, oh man, that's such a good reframe of it, because I have this kind of mantra, and it kind of sounds like I'm being a dickhead, but like everybody is unique, but like nobody's special. Like physiology is physiology. And granted, yes, with Some people's conditions like hypermobility, like there's legitimate functional things that we see that we should address. The same thing is like, I'm a big proponent of like, it's okay to round your back on a deadlift,
Yeah.
but the caveat to that is like, when we begin lifting, like you need to lift a load that is appropriate for you to that you tolerate. And ideally, we do put your back in somewhat of like an extended, which even like your extended posture is probably neutral. But where the nuance comes in and where the problems with Reddit are, and just this is the other really big thing that it's crazy because I've been in business and I've been a coach for like 12 years. I've been a PT for 7. Is like people people need like absolute clarity, and they
Yeah.
need and it's okay. Like this is the biggest thing, is the more clarity I have on like what I'm trying to do, what my goals are, and then to accept that most of like your strength training is gonna be kind of boring,
Yeah.
right? Like um and that's okay, and we can find ways to make it interesting to you. Like you like to do gymnastic type things, like that's fine. But if you go 0 to 100 with your gymnastics stuff, where you haven't been doing it the way you did it when you were a middle schooler or a high schooler, as an adult now, like you're probably going to blow yourself up. And
Yeah.
then what's hard is like, because I've done this is like my current predicament, is I've started getting back into sprinting and it was going relatively well. And then I just like dosed up my dose way too much.
Yeah.
And I'm like strained muscles and it sucks. And because I was enjoying it. Right. And then you get into this thing where you're trying to beat your head against the wall instead of pulling back appropriately.
Right.
Um, and that's hard. Our egos don't like doing that. But the question I have off of that, like, so give people an idea of like what a good strength training template kind of looks like without it being super specific here.
Okay, before even getting into that, and this kind of relates, the one other thing that clinicians need to know about
Yeah.
hypermobile, especially if they have a connective tissue disorder, is that there are some specific, what we label as comorbidities, that are much more common in this population to look out for. And the two main ones that any rehab professional needs to know about is something called mast cell activation syndrome. And the reason you need to know this is because the chemicals you use in your office, the scents you use in your office, the things you use to clean your office could be sending the person in front of you into an allergic reaction without you realizing. And that could be why they are feeling worse after your care, et cetera, et cetera. The other one is some form of dysautonomia. The most common one you'll hear is something called POTS. That is just one type of dysautonomia. Dysautonomia is when your autonomic nervous system is not so happy. And as rehab professionals, we are the first line treatment for that. Cardiac rehab is the number one way to work with this population. So we can actually really, really help this population. We just need to start learning about it. So with that being said, the strength training protocol needs to incorporate the comorbidities involved. And so we need to make sure that we are not experiencing any forms of post-exertional malaise and screening for that. And if that is clear, then we need to start incorporating slowly some level of cardiac rehab. So some level of cardio, being slow about it. I like to use heart rate zones for this specifically. I think it's an easy way to get buy-in in, but it doesn't have to be something that we are obsessive over. And then as far as your 3 compound lifts, I'm deadlift, squat, bench press, and then what accessories does the person in front of you enjoy? I work with a lot of retired gymnasts, a lot of retired cheerleaders and dancers. Most hypermobile people, those are the sports that they used to play. So I do a lot of handstands with my clients and it's a lot of fun. Or we'll do 20 minutes of Zumba, a Zumba class that they find on YouTube that they like. Or I have a lot of people that used to like yoga and they want to get back to that. So we'll start incorporating curtsy lunges or different things. A lot of single leg stability, single leg strength, posterior chain work is really important for this population, especially calf strength if their knees hyperextend. And yeah, we haven't even talked about proprioception yet. So
Yeah, we can get into that in a second. I think the thing this is a super powerful realization is I mean, it's been a realization, like squat, bench, deadlift, they should pretty much be in everybody's program, like in some capacity, whether you're squatting on 2 legs or 1 leg, even then, a bilateral squat, a bilateral hinge, some form of pressing, um loading your system in a sustainable way holistically is just super powerful. But yeah, let's get into proprioception. So just super layman's way of saying proprioception is knowing like your body's ability to know where it is in space. How is that affected with EDS, and yeah, how do you go about managing that?
Yeah. So when your joint, whether you have EDS or not, when your joint hyperextends, that means you lack proprioception in that area because it is going past where it usually would in space. And so we struggle with proprioception. And this is why a lot of the time, most people in this population will say they're clumsy, they drop stuff a lot, they run into things a lot. And so just incorporating little things throughout your day as a part of your day can go a really long way. So I have all of my clients when they're brushing their teeth, we just start doing that on one leg. When they're making coffee, we're going to close our eyes. Little things incorporated throughout your day and start habit stacking those things. It can really, really add up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very powerful. I think um it's like looking, and people who without our backgrounds don't really look at it like from the holistic standpoint of retraining your brain, right, to manage like range of motion, manage speed. I mean, some of it, a lot of times, I think I probably learned this from you, or I've talked to people, but just like slowing down,
Yes.
and allowing yourself to feel like that's one of the main rehab principles that I utilize is just controlling tempo can help with pain, because a lot of times, you get a stretch mediated pain, or you get some form of just loss of control with a movement, right? And also just slowing down like allows you to challenge yourself with a weight that if you were moving maybe at a faster tempo, you could lift easier, right? Like tempo work can be really beneficial. Um,
Yeah. And with that, like hypermobility is going to make things a little bit easier to go faster because you can use that range of motion
mhm.
instead of actually using the muscles like a RDL. I could touch my hands to the floor in 2 seconds. It's very easy. If I go slow and do that, that's when I actually feel it in my hamstring. So
Yeah,
utilizing tempo is huge.
yeah, that's a good point. All right, I'm gonna ask some curious questions. So, how much of the population of like, or what's the percentage of people with EDS that are like men that you see? Is it very prominent at all? Is it? Oh, I mean, I know that most of it is female, but what is the percentage of men?
So this is always changing, and there's 14 types of EDS. So I'm speaking for the hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos. That type is
Hmm.
80% female.
Hmm.
Marfan's is the more common connective tissue disorder that we see in men over females, whereas EDS is more females over men.
What's Marfan's?
Marfan's is also a connective tissue disorder, and it's very similar to EDS, but not exact. But it has the same, or not the same, but cardiac risks. But it also has a presentation of very tall, lean men with very like lanky, long limbs, very long fingers, very long arms. Those are the characteristics of Marfan's, but it's treated similarly to EDS from a musculoskeletal standpoint, but there are some other risks non-musculoskeletal, and they deal with different comorbidities.
Gotcha. Um, so the cardiac, we haven't talked about this, but the cardiac risks associated that is that because of like connective tissue? Is it because of like certain aspects of like ejection fraction, or what goes on there? Like tell us about that.
Yeah, so connective tissue lines literally everything in our body. And when you have a connective tissue disorder, the collagen, which is the protein that makes up some of the connective tissue, is altered, and that can affect your heart. And so there are some specific heart conditions that are more common in this population. And everybody that gets diagnosed with any form of EDS or any form of connective tissue disorder should always, this is like one of my I have 3 generalized rules, and that's it. The first one is go get an echocardiogram and make sure you have a cardiologist on your care team just to rule out the big, bad, and scary. Once that's ruled out, you're in the clear, you're good to go, you can move on. But that's really, really important.
Um, when it comes to, okay, so this kind of brings me to the next, like exogenous collagen, right? So supplementing with collagen. I want to get your take on stuff that people do that's beneficial, but then stuff that is not very evidence-based and, you know, maybe not as beneficial or just placebo. Like, so I think do you recommend taking some form of collagen as a supplementation or not? I don't remember.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So my opinion, well, let's facts and feelings this. So the
Yeah.
fact is taking a collagen supplement does nothing for your collagen that builds up your connective tissue. It is a
Perfect.
very different, that's just not how the human body works. I
Yep.
wish it was that simple. If it was as simple as you take a collagen supplement and your hypermobility is going to get better, life would be so much easier.
Yep.
It's not that simple. With that being said, I take collagen every day because it is one of the only protein sources that I can digest. So
Okay.
a lot of people in this population have gastroparesis. That's one of the biggest, most common comorbidities. And there's other GI stuff as well, but it can make certain proteins really hard to digest. And for me personally, and a lot of my clients, collagen is easily digestible. And so if that's going to get you an extra 20 grams of protein in, I'm all for it. I see no issue with it. You can get it non-flavored really easily. I find that harder with other types of protein. Is it as good as whey protein? No, but I can't digest whey protein. So that's not an option for me anyways. Is it better to get it from real food? Yes, but that's also not always realistic. So that's my opinion on collagen.
Yeah. I'm glad that you cleared that up for as far as collagen, like X going to X, right? Like, cause that's not really how a lot of it works. It's like, it's still got to get processed in your gut, broken down, reformulated. That's how pretty much everything works, right? So, and it's also good. I'm glad you clarified the gastroparesis piece, because that's just the big thing that we're seeing with a lot more of people. And you know, you got to find what you can tolerate. I'm very fortunate that I can pretty much tolerate everything. Some people can't, and getting in more protein is just good from a health standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So that leads to like, all right, what are the things that like you see people do that frustrate you, or you see people telling other people to do that frustrate you when it comes to hypermobility, EDS? And then after this, we're gonna get into chiropractic stuff or
There's
rehab.
so many. The biggest, honestly, is don't strength train. Strength training is dangerous for hypermobile bodies, and Pilates is the golden ticket end all be all. Pilates is great. You can incorporate that into your routine if you like it. There is nothing super special about Pilates. There's a lot of super special things about strength training, and this is documented. This is proven. This is not just me. Yes, I have a bias towards strength training, but like we all need to we need to be strength training. Period.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest one. From a nutritional standpoint, just blanketly following like the low histamine diet or blanketly following a protocol and really taking out a lot of nutrients that you don't know if your body can or can't handle, you're much better off working with a registered dietitian and doing a real elimination diet and figuring out for you what is affecting you. Just because that affects some people does not mean it's going to affect you. And you might go your whole life without eating a lot of things that you could have eaten. And I hate that. There is also a lot of supplement conversations in the hypermobile space. Supplements should always be guided by a professional. Never just you see this supplement and it helped one person, so I'm going to take it. And it should always be based off of your blood work. It should not just be kind of random. I saw that was good for hypermobility. There is no such thing as good for hypermobility. There's only such thing as good for you as a human with hypermobility. And then a lot of passive modality, and we're going to get into this when we talk about chiro, but like there is nothing special about a chiropractic adjustment that's making your body more healthy or putting bones in the right spot. And I don't want to get canceled again, but
You didn't get canceled. I think your business seems to have thrived.
That's true. That's true.
We were briefly talking about this, so just for context, Taylor was on it's not a relatively, it was a pretty well-known podcast that a lot of people saw. She got some clap back from other chiropractors, this is probably the problem with just our intellectual field, and people get very, very invested in what they do and what they do to like help people. Like this is probably one of my biggest things as like a physical therapist is I don't really care what you do, just don't talk about it as if it's like outside, and this is probably my bias, but like outside of exercise, like everything else we really do, like, and what I mean by exercise, and honestly, probably a piece of this, and you get this too, Taylor, is like exercise to me is providing a positive experience that people can feel good about if they keep at it, right? Whereas every other like modality that somebody does to somebody else for the goal of pain relief or maintenance, which I freaking hate that, but is someone else doing, and this is different than a massage for because massages feel good.
Yeah.
If like I have a massage, I go to a massage therapist a couple times a year. She's great. It feels really good to have somebody give you a good massage, right? But she doesn't use these narratives of like I'm doing this to your body, because she knows that I will suss that out pretty quick. But she just knows that like most of it's just that it's 45 to 60 minutes, it's 90 minutes, honestly, is the best thing, is just of me just relaxing and somebody like honestly touching me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like which feels really good.
Feels
And
really good.
like it
Do more things that feel good, but do it for
exactly.
that as the reason, and know that it is for short-term relief, and you can use that to your advantage.
Yep.
And I get a massage every other week. I love it. It makes my month so much easier. Do things that make your month easier or make your life easier. But the narrative and this idea that if you don't get that massage or you don't get that adjustment, that you are going to be worse off or less healthy or have more injuries or have more issues, that's got to stop. That's just not how the human body works. It's not how any of this works. It's got to stop.
Yeah. And people get really defensive about this because if you make money by doing the thing that like you know what? You can call me out. Like,
Yep.
yeah, Dave makes money by helping people train and by asking them questions. Like that's 90% of what I do.
Yep.
Is try organize structure training. When people, because people do, I'm gonna be honest, people have moans and groans when they work with me. Like training with me is not like you're gonna never experience anything bad again. It's literally like, no, we're gonna manage it quickly without you going to a doctor's appointment and being told to stop doing this activity or XYZ, because that's what life's really like. That's what being a medical professional, in my opinion, is actually like, when it's not super ominous, right? Like you said, if you're having cardiac palpitations or you've got really weird loss of function, we're gonna go get that checked out. But if you said my lower back hurts after XYZ, okay, I can make that make sense, right?
Yeah.
And so what do you think it is about, you can talk about physical therapists, you can talk about chiropractors, but like when it comes to the stuff that maybe we're seeing or we're wanting to change the narrative on, but you got like feedback, you got clapback. I keep using the word clapback now, it's in my vernacular for the day, but like, is it because people are afraid to change? Is it because they're so biased? Is it because they haven't like gotten with the times? And to some extent, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, but it's because they probably get some amount of results that they like from it, right?
That's what I
And
was
there's a
gonna
lot of people that
say.
like to go get adjusted, right?
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about chiropractors specifically because that's what I am. I'm a chiropractor, and that's what I interact with the most. It's a little bit different in the chiro world because there is two school systems, two educational systems that are teaching these chiropractors. So yes, it is a big portion that the individual is not up with the times, but can we really blame the individual when the school is teaching them these things? This is what they're going to school for. This is what they're learning. This is who their mentors are now. This is who they look up to now. And now they're out of school and they're doing this and they're getting results and they're making money doing it. Of course, they're going to believe it. Why wouldn't they? Makes sense. And that's a big issue in the chiropractic world, is that there are a lot of chiropractic schools that teach straight chiropractic, which is the label of that type of chiropractic. And yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. And I think also going back to the anecdotal kind of evidence that they're seeing, and part of being a chiropractor, for whatever reason, I never experienced this, is like going away from Western medicine and kind of getting away and being more of that. And so I think in their mind that if this doesn't work and if this isn't the way and they are getting the results for some other reason, then that makes chiropractic less valid, which is not true. And why are we fighting so hard for this idea from 100 years ago? Like, we can do so much good and help so many people. Why isn't that enough? Why do we have to be nervous system doctors? What does that even mean? And whatever.
DC Palmer was I'm not very far from the original school of
Yeah.
Palmer. I almost went to chiropractic. I was like, it came down really like, do you want to go to chiropractic at Palmer, or do you want to do, and because I grew up, my mom went and had chiropractic adjustments on the regular, right? And some of the funny thing was when I started to put the pieces together was like, Mom, what really helps your back pain is when like one of the chiros started to give you exercises to do, you know, and helped you kind of see some patterns that if you worked on, and I'm not talking like functional patterns, I'm talking like patterns in behavior and exercise and like strengthening and moving. And also
I'm gonna call you out for a second though, because that's your bias showing too. Like, we can't say that it's the exercises that made your mom's back feel better.
True.
But with that being said, a lot of it probably has to do with the narrative that chiropractor was saying, and giving your mom some power back, giving her some self-efficacy in treating her own thing. It wasn't those specific exercises.
I'm gonna say right now, those exercises were kind of bullshit.
Exactly.
From what I remember.
I'm sure they were.
Because it wasn't like strength training. It was like, it was some pretty simple stuff, but it did give her a lot of self-efficacy. And, you know, she still went back and she still got adjustments. Like, the only time my mom, I don't think, has gone to get a chiropractic in the past, my mom has been a client of mine for 3 years, right? And that was probably the best part about legitimizing my business is she started to like strength train, and she's paid me money to be my client, and she gets a discount, people. I'm not charging my mom full price. But she's gotten so much stronger, and she also has gotten more resilient and seen like, okay, like I can make this make sense, right? And me and a client were actually talking today briefly, and it's like, rehab in a nutshell is, if I don't move my body, I don't feel great. If I move my body too much, I don't feel great. And the hard part is kind of living in this bandwidth and being okay with a little bit of that undulation and bouncing back and forth to eventually just settle on like a recipe that works for you. My big deal with chiropractic, and because a lot of people, and this is good, a lot of people love their chiropractor.
Yeah.
They like 100%. Them. And I'm that's great. And in the right context, with the right narratives, like if you going to see somebody every couple weeks, that it's health-seeking behavior. It can be super health-seeking behavior, right? My problem is the people that, I have a buddy that's like 20. I'm 36, so I guess he's probably 34, 35. But 2 or 3 years ago, I saw him, and I'm like, how's it going, dude? And he's like, good. And he's like, oh, except my back's just completely shit. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, man, I've been going to a chiropractor for like the last 8 months. I paid him like, you know, it's getting better, but I'm like, what have you been doing for 8 months? And he's like, yeah, so I go every week, and it was, you know, I bought into like this thing. He probably paid like $5,000
easily,
right? Yep. And I was like, what the heck? I mean, man, like you can pay me way less than that, and I will help you, and you'll actually get stronger and you'll get fitter, right? But you can't convince people.
No, and it's not our job to. And so like, with all of this being said, chiropractors can be amazing. I'm a chiropractor. Judge the professional, not the profession. And one thing that is, like you just brought up, that's really cool about chiropractic, that is a little bit different than physical therapy, is there is a very no barrier to access. You can walk into any chiropractor and you don't need a referral. You don't really for PT either, but a lot of people see PT in that way. And so there is this easier access to chiropractors in a way. And there's also, you get to spend a lot of time with your chiropractor, way more than you're going to spend with an MD. You're also getting touched. There's so much power in physical touch. You're also getting somebody telling you, this is going to make you feel better. We want to make people in power, or people that we're paying money to. We want them to be right. I'm paying money. Yeah, I want this to be right. I want this to make me feel better. And if it is making you feel better, if those adjustments are making you feel better, that's amazing. There's so much value in that. Use that to your advantage. But what I don't like is, one, if you are getting worse after those adjustments and you're still going because you feel like you're going to be unhealthy, or your clinician told you you need to keep coming, it's just going to take some time. No, run. If you're not getting better, if you're not feeling relief, the only point of an adjustment is relief. If you do not feel relief after that adjustment, you do not need it, period.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. And that's really the context that a lot of this stuff, like PT's causing pain, like I'm causing pain. Like, yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of, I can get it, because I like to, like, when I get a massage, I like to get the crap beat out of me.
Yeah.
Right. But I also kind of know what's going on there. But like, man, have you seen any of the like the Neymar Jr. ACL recovery like
No.
things? Oh my God. Like, they are just making him hurt so bad as he's getting back range of motion. It's like, you don't need to do this, right? And unfortunately, the PT world, the chiro world always talks about like getting buy-in from people about the plan. It's like, and some of this is expectations, like, because people think that what PT is, or people think what chiropractic is, are these like kind of these modalities, right? The thing about it is, for PT, the modality changes like every 5 or 6 years. Like, oh, we're doing needling now. Now we're doing cupping. We're getting into adjustments because patients want this stuff. And it's like, yeah, my job is not to do modalities. My job is to help you understand your body
Yeah.
and why you could be experiencing this pain. And honestly, I throw up that max multifactorial. And honestly, the first session, it's really just to show you that, like, hey, you can do something about this. That was my biggest thing when I was in the clinic. It was literally like, all I'm trying to do in that session is help you see that this can get a little bit better, right? People would come in with back pain and they're like, it hurts to walk, it hurts to bend. And it's like, hey, let's hop on the bike. And if it feels good to bike, this is your entry point for more activity, right? For health seeking behavior. And also, like, just any form of movement that, hey, that's not painful, that's relief, that's great. It's just like what you said, right? But I think people just get really, I made a post a couple weeks ago because my wife just said something, and I'm like, I'm going to make a post about that immediately. And I got like clap back from clinicians, which I don't really want to affect clinicians. Like, I have clinicians on my roster, but it's just like, people are like, oh, this stuff, this isn't right. Like, I'm like, my big point is, if the patient like can't keep doing it themselves after working with me, then I probably don't want to do it for very long. And I don't really even want to do it at all. Right. But all right, last like big thing, because I gotta go train a couple people here in a little bit here. But all right, stepping out of your comfort zone as a content creator, as a podcaster, what are the things that have been, and even as a clinician, because talking about stuff that is kind of divisive is hard, but what are the things you've learned and told yourself and had other people tell you that have been helpful as you've kind of gone on your content creation journey?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is, it's not about you. Whatever somebody is saying, it's not about you. It's about them. There is something in them that makes them feel this way. And then I would like, I guess this isn't really like a lesson, but it was more of a realization, is like, people can be mean. People can be really, really mean. I'm a little naive, and I think that everybody is nice until proven otherwise. And I've been proven wrong a little too much on that recently. And so I guess keeping my guard up a little bit in terms of, and also being kinder, like being that type of person I want to be, and being nicer, and also reiterating, like, we need to keep talking about this. Just because you're hiding behind a screen doesn't mean you can call somebody the R word. Like, that's unacceptable. That's not okay. Don't do that. And yes, but the biggest realization through this process and putting myself out there is that we need this. The world needs this. We have so much work to do. I did not realize that side of chiropractic was as big as it was, because I live in my little echo chamber. It's just as much as we're growing, they're growing just as much too. We have a lot of work to do. That's the biggest realization I've had.
Well, and it's it's not about you. Like, it's honestly, we're talking about stuff that like we believe.
Right.
Right. And so being objective in the conversation, like, cause when I did post the post I made, I didn't blow up or anything, but I did get like a few PTs that I really do. Man, it's crazy how your brain goes into overdrive and like you
Yeah.
get into fight or flight, like, even though it's like, who
Instantly.
really gives a shit, right?
Yeah.
But like, you know, I went in and I said, like, because I also used my language carefully. It's like, I don't find these things valuable, right? And they were like pretty much past modalities, and I didn't say that. And people were like kind of saying like, how can you say that these aren't like good treatments or X, Y, Z? I'm like, it's not that I didn't say they're good. I just said they're not that valuable to me. But I also said, like, I appreciate like why you want to do these, because they do help you establish some amount of, hey, we changed your symptoms, right? We gave you relief. We were able to build some form of therapeutic alliance, right? Like, the number one reason that I would do manual therapy, or like the reason that in the clinic, like, you're just kind of told how to practice. A lot of times for PTs, it's like, spend 15 to 20 minutes doing manual, spend 10 to 15 minutes doing exercise, and then finish up with a modality. And then like, but like, I pretty much just went like 10 minutes of manual and then exercise. But I just wanted to talk to people, and like them laying down or them being on their back for a little bit, or me doing some amount of hands-on work, provided the opportunity to actually like spend time talking to them, right? And
Yeah.
um but it is about, it's always just about, it's just our ego, like, it's just
Always
me.
ego.
Like,
But it's
I want to be right.
yeah.
I want to help
Yeah.
people the way I want to help, which is why you like go start your own business.
Yeah,
Like, that's what it really
exactly.
comes down to.
Exactly. And like, I think the biggest thing too, especially like in the chiro world, and because I have a platform called Clinical Concepts where we are trying to change the chiro world, we were talking about this a little bit before. It's this fine line of like, let me do my thing and I'll live in my echo chamber, but then also like bigger picture, people are getting hurt and scammed,
Yeah.
and that's not okay, and that needs to change. And if I can be a little piece of that, I'm willing to take the brunt. I'm willing to take the name calling. I know it's not about me. I will live. But change needs to happen as far as I'm concerned in the healthcare world in general. We are scamming people. We are taking a lot of people's hope away from them. We are making people less healthy, less strong, both mentally and physically, by the narratives that were all over those comments. And I have a problem with that. And I'm not going to shut up about it. And I am going to keep talking about it.
There you go. You're pissed
Yeah,
off now. But
exactly.
I mean, there's a great John Wooden quote. John Wooden was like the basketball coach for UCLA, like won a bunch of national championships. He's a leader, right? And he is like, just you never want to do something for too long that somebody should be doing for themselves, right? So I do think there's, and I think the too long I added, but that's my biggest thing.
Yeah.
Like, when you take people's, because this is the other big thing, is me changing my mentality from, and I was never really going to be like a fixer because I was already like a trainer and a coach before, but like, it's not about my ego. It is about my ego. My ego, I just want to help people do it themselves. I'm a teacher. I want to be a teacher. Honestly, if teachers made $100,000, I'd be a teacher right now. Like, but unfortunately our education system's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I just want to teach you as best I can what I know, and then so you can go do it as best you can. Like, that's what coaching is. That's why it's super cool. It's like creating a bandwidth of, hey, we got to experiment, we got to try it out, and we got to do it long enough. But yeah, so many people are getting burnt. Like my buddy, he gets through that 8 months of whatever and his back's still not feeling great, like the next thing he's going to go to do is surgery, right?
Well, but also he's going to feel shame that he didn't do the program or
Perfectly.
protocol
Yeah.
perfectly or right enough. And the chiro's probably going to say, oh, you just need to come in for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Oh, like that's what they do. And I worked at a clinic where that was our script. That's how they taught us. Like they teach you how to create urgency. They teach you how to sell this care plan. They teach you how to make the person in front of you make them feel broken. And then you're going to be the fixer. And so going back to like our egos and you knowing that about yourself, you know you want to be a teacher. For those of you who know you want to be a healer and you feel that inside of you and you want to use your hands and you want to help people, that is great. Do that. We need that in the world. Just don't create these scammy, fearful narratives around it. Just call it out what it is. Say, I'm going to make you feel really good today. That's so valuable. That's amazing. I can't do that. That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Just
know,
the power of disrupting the cycle for a little bit, I mean, is huge, right? So, and then just saying like, yeah, all right, so now go do what you can for yourself, and like, you know, provide a framework for that if you can. And but I mean, the human condition isn't really gonna change. We're always gonna have like angst about our body and angst about what we should be doing, and especially in this current age, like, am I doing enough? Right? Am I like, I just was reading it's a Fool by Randomness, but it's also it's behavioral economics, and people would rather make $70,000 knowing that the people around them are making 60 than making 90 if the people around them are $100,000, right? People would just rather be poorer but superior than being better off with more options because of a superiority, right? And like, there's so much of that. Like, that is the human condition in a nutshell, and that's the clinician mindset in a nutshell. And I fall into it too. Like, I want to be a really good clinician because it makes my ego feel happy. But the best way for me to be a good clinician is to give the power to the person I'm working with as best possible, right? And that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, so, it is hard, and we can do hard things.
100%. I appreciate the motivation. But no, always good to chat. This has been really good. I appreciate you coming on. I know how busy you are, and I'm grateful that you're busy because you're kicking butt and doing a lot of good things and stepping into fear, which is super powerful. So, where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. You are one of my favorite humans to talk to. So you can find me on Instagram or TikTok at the Hypermobile Chiro. The hypermobilechiro.com has a lot of resources for both patients and clinicians. You can also find me on Clinical Concepts Instagram. Yeah.
I love it. Check out Taylor. What was that podcast? Let's get that podcast name. Who was it with?
It's called What's the Juice?
What's the Juice? Okay. Yeah, look for Taylor on that. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you. Talk soon.
Awesome. Have a good day.
Bye. Welcome to this episode of the Strong and Kind podcast. This episode is with Will Rattel. Will is a collegiate strength and conditioning coach. He's a super strong guy. He puts out programs under the title of Hoss, as in he is a giant hoss of a man. Will is on Instagram and YouTube. He creates content, puts out programs. He is also someone that believes in good training. And we got into good training. We got into silly training. And we had an overall good discussion. So check out this episode. Appreciate you being here. Check me out on YouTube and Spotify. Peace.